We are live. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk with Gavin Wong Magic about playing cards, especially custom playing cards, and I hope I will get some advices for my decks. Hi, Gavin. It's nice to meet you.
Yes, hi Gary.
Um,
Nice to meet you as well.
yeah, let me introduce my guest. So Gavin is a content creator. He's a playing cards collector, cardist. I don't know, maybe magician. Am I right? Maybe I forget something.
No, yeah, you're 100% right. Start off doing magic as a hobby and then kind of led into card collecting and now a little bit of cardistry. So a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Cool, nice, really nice. And the very first question: how did you come to playing cards, and what are playing cards to you? Let me give you an example because, let's say, for me, playing cards it's something relaxing for me, like meditation, and also this is the art because about 12 years ago I started as a designer, and now I'm creating playing cards. It's I don't know. It's something between an art and hobby. And what is the playing cards for you?
Yeah. So in the beginning, when I first started collecting, sorry, I think there's a slight echo. Okay. Yeah. So when I first started collecting playing cards was I was a kid, I got into Magic first. I was maybe like 12, 13 years old. I had just seen David Blaine's Street Magic, right? I was getting into Magic. And then I saw some illusionists had some really cool playing cards, right? They had like the Black Tiger or whatever. And I remember I wanted to get them all because I had never seen like fully custom playing cards, right? It was very, very cool. And I had a very limited budget as a kid, and I couldn't collect all of them that I wanted. So I had to just pick and choose which were my favorites. And I settled on just collecting green colored playing cards. And so I had maybe like five or six, right? And that's all I had as a kid. And I'll always see these really, really cool cards, and I always want to collect them. And I treasured these, five or six that I had. Um, and I mean, to me, it's something like you said, it's meditation, right? It's like something that I always want to play with. Like even sitting in front of the TV or just in front of the computer watching something, I'm always fiddling with a deck of cards, dribbling and just shuffling. So it's a very cool thing to me, just very, very meditative. And then on top of that, just seeing all the artwork, right? The amazing stories that people tell through just 52 pieces of paper. It's amazing, to see the story, to see all the different designs, the artwork that goes into it. I think it's very fascinating and just such a very cool hobby to me.
Okay, cool. What advice would you give to a person who's starting to create playing cards? Let's say the person like me. By the way, you made amazing promotion for Miami Gorillas deck. I really appreciate it. It's something amazing. At first time, I got this kind of promotion. You did a lot of content and really, really cool content. What is your advice? Because I did everything the way I wanted to, and many mistakes were made. And maybe for someone, it's a day number one when he start creating custom playing cards.
Yeah, I think any advice for somebody that's trying to create their own deck of cards is, I think number one, like you have to have fun with it, right? I think that's the most important thing. Whether you're creating deck of cards, you're trying to create content, any of that sort of material. I think number one is just to have fun with it. Otherwise, it feels like a chore to you, and you might not get that satisfaction from it, right? So I think number one is just you have to have fun with it. And then number two, I would say is don't be afraid to go back to the drawing board, right, and get other people's opinions. So like I know with your deck, when I promoted it on I think it was one of the forums online, I think there was some feedback about some people saying, oh, like 51 states is too much, or oh, it's a huge undertaking, right? The huge project that you have. Um, but I think number one is just, or number two is just trying to go back to the drawing board and take that feedback that people have, right? So I think your deck was actually very, very good, and there wasn't any specific feedback against like your artwork or the design. But I think in general, if somebody says like, oh, I don't like the way this was done, or I don't like the way this was done, I think it's important to maybe be okay going back to the drawing board and altering some things based on some feedback. And it's something that I've seen in the past, right? So somebody has a deck that they've done, 52 cards, and they're ready to release it, and they try to launch on Kickstarter and it fails. And so they go out to the Facebook groups and the forums, and they try to get people's opinion. And I've seen decks change completely 180 just based on people's feedback, right? So I think it's not like a personal thing, right? People aren't attacking you; they're saying like, "Oh, I hate your artwork," or this, right? It's just trying to appeal to the masses, and so I think that's another very important thing as well. Is just not being stuck on your idea.
Okay, I have some thoughts about the Miami Gorillas. Uh, is it possible that it was the wrong time when we launched the campaign? It was beginning of August, and it was very hot. People think about the beach, about vacations. What do you think? Or can it be the reason why we didn't get even $1,000 on the Kickstarter?
Yeah, I think timing definitely had a role in that. Not so much maybe just the summer, the season, but I think it was mainly just the economy as well, right? Not a lot of people are backing decks as much on Kickstarter as opposed to maybe like 1 year ago or 2 years ago. Um, and I think also maybe just market saturation has to do with it as well, just because a couple years ago you didn't see that many decks come out on Kickstarter, but it seems like the playing card community has really grown over this time, and so you see a lot. Every single week I see some new cards being released on Kickstarter, right? So it's very hard for somebody who might not be very interested and that's following Kickstarter very closely to know all these decks that are coming out, right? So I think number one, it's just kind of making yourself stand out from everybody else. And then number two, I think is just bad timing because the economy, not a lot of people are backing decks. I mean, I've seen some really, really good decks that were released on Kickstarter that failed. That to me, I thought, 100% should have been funded. But again, I think it's just due to the economy and not a lot of people are, spending money on playing cards at the moment.
Okay, is there any point to like restart the campaign same day, maybe later? What do you think? Is it possible to raise some funds this way?
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth relaunching again, especially with something like the Miami Gorillas deck. I personally I love the artwork. I love the style. I was surprised that it didn't get more funding than it did. But I definitely think in your case it's worth relaunching. Maybe once we start seeing better economy and maybe try to space it out from other Kickstarter decks and just try to time it just right. But
Or
yeah.
maybe maybe when collection will be bigger, yeah. So at the moment I have only one the prototype of this deck, which I made using MPC series, this deck. So this is the
Yeah.
only one copy, and it's so so valuable for me. So yeah. Okay, let's talk about three things to pay attention to where when making custom playing cards. As a collector, what do you pay attention to? Three things.
I would say number one thing is the back design, right? Because when you look at playing cards, or when you just use them in general, right, whether it's cardistry or magic, or just trying to show off a deck, like one of the number one things people will notice is the back design. So for me, it needs to be something that's very eye-catching, very colorful. If that's what you're going for, which in the case of the Miami Gorillas deck, definitely that's what you're going for. Um,
Sorry. By the way, how important for you white border here on the back side?
Yeah, good question. So I was going to mention that. So also, right, it depends if you're going for border or borderless. I actually, when I started out doing Magic, right, I like the bordered cards because it's easy to do certain moves, double lift and things like that with bordered cards. But I found like with cardistry, because I love doing card fans when I do cardistry. I love a good borderless deck. So something like the Miami Gorillas, the fact that it's borderless and it has the bananas right at the edge, it makes a really good looking fan. So I mean, I think there's two different ways you can go with it, right? You can go with the border deck, which looks a little bit better. It functions better for Magic, and then for things like packet cuts, it's better. But in terms of fanning, having borderless, like the way you have it, it looks so good and so clean. So that's why I really like the borderless look. And then also another thing that I look at is two-way back design, right?
So for different tricks, you need different decks.
I would say for Magic, I tend to do bordered decks just because just because it's easier when you have double lift or when you have certain cards turned face up in a face down deck, right? It doesn't stick out as much. So not necessarily different tricks, but or if you're saying like different cardistry things, a little bit. I would say there's a little bit of a distinction there because you can still do everything right with the borderless deck. You can still do cardistry and all that. I think it just looks a little bit better if you're doing cardistry with like a border deck because when you do the packet cuts, it flows a little bit better. You can see the distinction between the packets.
Okay, and then let's come back. Three things. The backside, three things that you pay attention to. Backside, then.
Yep. So backside was number one. I would say the custom faces. I don't like to have a deck of cards that have just the plain, USPCC plain faces. Just because for me, it doesn't stand out enough, right? So I think if I'm buying a custom deck of cards, I want it custom on the back and fully custom on the faces as well. And if you want to do like semi-custom court cards or semi-custom court cards on the faces, that's fine with me as long as there's some sort of difference from your standard US PCC. So that's number two. And then I would say item number three is for B is the stock, right? So it definitely depends on who you're using. I'm very used to using US PCC, right? Because that's what I practice with. I use bicycle cards mainly when I'm doing Magic and when I practice on my cardistry and stuff. But I would say Cardamundi right now for me has one of the best feeling stocks out there. And so if you're telling me you're using somebody, it's like a very unknown printer for your Kickstarter campaign, that's going to make me stop and kind of question it a little bit because then I don't know if the stock is going to feel the way I like it.
You used the Cybernew deck. What can you say about the material? I mean, the paper and the quality. How, if we compare with USPC, what can you say about Cybernew?
Yeah, so Cybernude was great. Cybernude it felt really, really good. Remind me again, who was the printer for Cybernude?
It was WPCC or something. It's Chinese company, but I compare with Bicycle USPC quality, and there it's really close. It's really close. Maybe slightly different, but still, yeah, it's made in China.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that. I think nowadays there's so many different printers that actually have good quality cards, right? Because back in the day, I think it was USPCC was number one, and then number two was probably very far down below. But I think it's a lot closer now between like one, two, three, four, five. There's all these printers. There's Legends, USPCC, Cardamundi. There's other companies out of China that are doing some really good stuff. So I think nowadays you can really go with any of those major, top 5 or 6 printers, and you'll be okay. But I think just going outside of those top ones, that's when people start to question the quality of the cards and the stock. And so anything that's like relatively unknown, I probably won't back it on Kickstarter.
Yeah, but the problem with Cartamundi, the price they made so high price last year, and it's it's really difficult to make lower price on Kickstarter. But people asking why these decks are so expensive, and that's the reason why we are trying to find another printers. And also, let's say if we print in China, it's much more faster than in a United States playing cards company. They, I think it was 3 months or something. It's quite long. Yeah, that's the and that is the second reason. Okay, cool. So also I have a question to you about decks. How many decks usually playing cards collectors or cardists buy? Because I heard that for different tricks we need to use different conditions of the deck. I mean, the playing cards for better sliding, they should be new, and for maybe some tricky manipulations, we need more used paper, used decks. Is it true? And how many decks usually you use for this purpose?
Yeah, good question. So when I first started out collecting, if there was a deck that I really, really liked, I would buy sometimes a whole brick of them. right? Just because I was like, oh, I love this so much, I want to keep the whole brick of them just in case. But now, recently, just with the number of decks that I have, I actually really cut that down, and I only really just buy either one or two, just because I'm running out of space and just my closet's full, and it's very costly to buy a whole brick of cards, right? Um, so it really depends. I know some collectors, same thing. If they really like something, they'll buy, multiple copies. They'll buy a brick sometimes. I know people that buy two decks, one to open, one to keep sealed, right?
But sorry, but I can bet one deck is never opened. Yes, one deck.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. um, and so yeah, so I know people that they'll buy like multiple, they'll buy two, so they have one to open, one to always keep sealed for their collection. Um, so I think it just really varies on the collector. And then for me, um, you're right about the the different conditions of the decks, right? So it depends on what you want to do, right? If you want a really good fanning deck, you want it to be in almost pristine new condition, right? So it fans very smoothly. But a lot of times, if you're doing things like packet cuts and certain manipulations, you want the deck to be worn in a little bit more, right? So the cards are a little bit stickier; they don't slide all over the place. Um, so yeah, it really depends on the main purpose of the deck they're using it for. But for me, to be honest, I just really only keep one copy of the deck opened nowadays, and then I'll do a bunch of fanning and stuff in the beginning, and then as I start to wear it away, I'll do more packet cuts. And then you can always use fanning powder, right? That's one of the things that I've recently been using a lot more with some of my more worn-in decks, is using fanning powder to make them, fan a lot smoother. The only issue there is that then the deck doesn't become very good for Magic, because it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more like sticky. It's harder to manipulate for certain Magic. So it really depends on like what you're using the deck for. If you're using the deck for Magic or for cardistry, I would say you have two very different conditions of the deck. Oh, I think you're still on mute.
Sorry. How long usually one deck lasts? I mean, you can't use it all your life. How long you can use one deck if you use it every day for different tricks and manipulations, magic, or and so on? I mean, you need one day you need to replace it. Yes.
Yeah, that was one of the primary reasons why I bought like a brick of cards, was because I was like, I like it so much, I know I'm going to use it, and I'm going to have to buy more, right? And then later on, if it becomes hard to buy, it becomes very expensive. But nowadays, I actually can get a lot of use out of my deck of cards, because I I have my practice decks, which are my old beaten up bicycle decks, right? And then I usually only pull out my fully custom decks to show off, on Instagram or on TikTok, or to try a move that I've already practiced a lot and I've mastered, right? So I'm not going to pull out one of these fancy expensive decks and try something new, to drop the cards and to ruin the cards, right? So I get a lot of use out of the cards that I have, just because I practice on an old beaten up deck, and so I can make a deck last, many, many years, before I have to replace it.
Wow, nice. In your experience, which custom playing cards goes better on Kickstarter? Something more classical, or maybe something unusual? What do you think? What is what's the what people like more, the best?
Yeah, it's tough because I've seen both, right? I've seen some classical decks that I was like, oh, it looks too plain. It's, not enough customization, and it does really well, right? But then I've also seen, some decks that are very, very strange, very, very new, like totally abstract, and that also does well. So I think I've definitely seen a combination of both. I think, in my opinion, the abstract decks that are very unique, fully custom, that there's really nothing else like it on the market. I think those do better, in my opinion. And I think that gets a lot more people talking, right? You see a deck that's like brand.
Oh, looks like you're gone. You hear
Oh,
me?
yes, yes. Can you see me?
Uh,
Okay.
s- yeah. Now it's not now it's fine. Okay, you can
Okay.
continue.
So I mean, in my opinion, I think the ones that are very unique, custom, abstract, I think they tend to do better. The only problem is it becomes a little bit more challenging to get an audience for that. Though at the same time, there's people that love their classical decks, and then they're not very open to seeing new things that are very unusual, right? So I think it's trying to find a balance of both.
Okay, so your advice for me as a playing cards creator, not to focus only on something fancy, but try to make something classic. Um, mm, Last year, I did a deck. It was tricks. Unfortunately, we had a problem with slang, American slang, and
Mm.
the tricks in combination with girls. It was looks like it was bad idea. Did you see did you see this deck on the website? We have a separate page there.
I actually haven't seen that, no, but I
Okay,
could definitely see.
I will try to share a screen and show it to you, and maybe you can give some advices. Um, okay, let me open it.
Yeah.
So I will open it on Kickstarter. So basically, this is the deck. Do you see my screen?
Yes, I do see it. Yes.
Okay. So the idea was girls with in masks. So every man character, I mean King and Jack, in fact, it was a girl with a mask. And the trick idea with tricks like girls make tricks, not in sexual meaning, but like in another meaning.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was design of tricks deck.
Okay, I have
And
seen this before. So yeah, sorry, I have seen this before.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Do you have some advices
Um,
for this deck?
I like the artwork. I have nothing wrong with the deck. The artwork looks good. The backside looks good. I remember seeing that in the past. I think, yeah, just unfortunate that the tricks associated with girls, and it just some people might get offended by that. Um, but no, I think the deck looks great.
What do you think? The name of the deck, is it so serious for playing cards collectors that they will never buy this deck because of the meaning? I mean, different meaning of deck name, or there's some other reason, maybe small pips, maybe problem in backside or something, because I talked with one distributor and he said that they don't like small details on the background, on the backside.
Mm.
What do you think about this? Is it is it really problem?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the name. I think it depends on, some people, they're very, serious about their cards, and you know, they don't want to like associate like cards with, certain girls or things like that. So I think it depends on the collector. For me, I don't really have a problem with that. Um, but I can get what you're saying about the small details. I think some of the printers, they don't like that, right? Because it's very hard for them to replicate, or sometimes it doesn't look right. I actually like the small pips, to be honest, because when you do a fan and you have small pips, it looks really nice. Um, so I actually like that. I don't. There's certain decks that I think like Stockholm 17 does, with like small pips that look really good, as opposed to some of the bigger pips that I've seen out there where you can't really show all the faces when you do like a fan. So personally, I like the small pips, and I don't really mind, the name of a deck, and I like to have fun with my cards, right? That's the whole purpose of cards, is have fun. But I can see why some people, they want to take things a little bit more seriously, or they don't like how certain things are named. So I can definitely understand that. Yeah.
Okay, and another question about the Miami Gorillas. I will open this. Let me share my screen again and open the campaign, because there was another problem. Um, okay, so here was the problem that Miami Gorillas and this association, that gorillas with black people. I really, I'm from Eastern Europe. For me, we never have this kind of association, because for us, gorillas is a very smart animal. Um, but my friend from Washington said that it could be like the problem. again, do you think it might be problem, or again it's just the wrong time, or maybe some other reason or economy or something? And also I would like to ask you about the whole idea of 51 decks for every single iconic city, and this one dark horse that we will release in the very end of this collection, at the very last deck. Is it good idea? What is your opinion? Maybe your advices? So yeah, it will be interesting to hear from you.
Yeah. So your first question was about the whole gorillas, being associated with African American or Black people. It was when I first saw the deck, it was a thought that kind of crossed my mind, maybe for like 10 seconds or so. Was just it was something that just came into my mind really quickly. But I don't think there's an issue there, because it's an animal, like you said, right? I mean, there's some people that might get offended by it, but really, there's no association to me with what you're trying to do, with gorillas, the animal. I think maybe it might be different if you did like, the African gorillas, or something that's like there's more of a tie-in. But to me, it's not really an issue, because really, if you're trying to nitpick, you could find something wrong with every single deck, right? With every single animal, there's always some sort of negative connotation that you could find anywhere, right? So I don't know. For me, I didn't really. I thought about it for maybe like a second, and then I was like, no, I don't think that's really like a thing. So I don't think that's really an issue there. Um, and then you mentioned the whole 51 cities thing. I like the idea of having 51 iconic cities. I think it's a huge undertaking, and I think somebody did mention in one of the forums that I had posted the deck to was, it's they didn't want to back it because they don't want to jump into this hole of having to like collect all 51 decks for each city. And I was like, well, you don't have to collect all 51 in the collection, right? You can just collect the ones that you like, or the ones, the cities that you personally have visited, or whatever, right? Nobody's saying you have to collect all 51. Um, and I think sometimes collectors, they get into that mindset where they're like, oh, I want to be like a completionist where I have every single deck from this set, right? And it becomes very difficult and expensive, right? But nobody's saying you have to collect all 51. So that was one thing that I noticed. But overall, I like the idea of the 51 cities. Um, and I do have some questions for you though, if we have time at the end, about your project and your vision.
Okay, I will answer all your questions.
Okay, yeah. So I guess number one is, where did the idea for doing 51 cities come from?
Actually, one guy from our Discord mentioned this idea when he made a review for Trix deck. No, sorry, not for Trix deck, Las Vegas deck. And then he said, "Why you don't want to make decks with different names?" And here I came up with that idea. So basically, that was the very first point where I decided to start making this collection. I really don't know how long it will take, because the things are so slow. Launching campaign, printing decks, sending them out, and step by step. So but I think we can make like the biggest part of this collection in digital version and print them step by step. Maybe they will be designed in 3 years, maybe, yeah, maybe 3-4 years, but produced maybe in 6 years. It depends. Or
Yeah,
maybe one day we'll have super successful campaign and we produce, let's say, 5-6 different decks at the same time. uh, everything, it depends. So yeah, that's basically where we come up with that idea.
nice. Okay, no, that's good to hear. And then the next question that I have for you is, do you already have all 51 decks planned, or do you only have some of them and you're still coming up with which cities you
Okay,
want to do?
very good question. We have a list of cities. Also, we have ideas for next 6-7 decks, but we really don't know about other decks. It's It's very difficult. For sure, I know it will be steampunk, maybe Amazon, maybe it will be something like abstract decks. Right now, we are working on black and yellow deck. It's amazing design, I think, and the most interesting part in this deck that we have like two in one. First, it's playing cards, and inside these playing cards, we have card game that you can play in a group of people. I think I will tell it about this deck later to you and maybe to my followers.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Sounds
Yeah,
amazing. Can't wait to see it.
this is then not the first deck. We want to make them two in one. Also, I was thinking about Chicago deck to make it with like gangsters as characters and using backside as a map. So when it's not you will never make a nice fan with this deck, but if you put all decks in one square, so you need two decks actually. Yeah, you use
Mm.
first deck for a map and the second deck as a characters and the numbers as additional options. So you use two decks as a
Wow.
board game. This is a very tricky project, and we keep it for a little bit later. um, but still, I want to make every single deck unique and unusual, if we could say it this way.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. That sounds great.
Thanks.
And then one last question for you about your 51 cities project. Have you actually been to all the cities that you're planning to do for your decks, or
No, bro, never been, and I dream about it. But as you know, it's very expensive to go and visit every single city. Uh, but it's in my plans. It's really in my
got it?
plans.
Okay,
The idea
yeah,
was, first visit the city, and after that, when you are inspired, make a deck. But I think at the moment it will be really difficult. I have a little baby. I have a
mm,
daughter who's going to school, so this family stuff. It's a little bit tricky. Yeah. So, and I have also one question to you. Uh, who usually buys playing cards? Not if we not talk about cardists, magicians, collectors. Is there any other group of people who buy playing cards?
I would say that's probably the main ones, right? Like magicians, cardists, collectors, like you said. The problem with some of these people, especially cardists and collectors, they don't buy a lot of decks at once, right? So like I would say like cardists, you see them use decks that are really beaten up. The edges are all yellow and brown, so they keep their decks forever, right? That's the problem with cardists. Um, Card collectors, they keep their decks sealed and they don't play with their cards. They never open them, right? So I guess from a designer perspective, that's another problem because they never open them, right? So magicians, they're the ones that really use the decks a lot and they go through them, um, and that's why they use cheap decks like regular bicycle ones or tally hos and things like that. Um, but also people like I say people buy cards to play card games with and stuff like that. Um, Outside of those the three groups. So I think that's another major consumer is just very casual people that like playing cards with their friends, or for gatherings and things like that. There's probably another big group of people that buy playing cards.
Okay, if we talk about the numbers, what do you think? How big this consumers group of people all around the world?
Ooh, that That's a good question. I really have no idea. That's a good question. I hope I mean, it seems like it's growing, right? Because we see the number of decks that are being released on Kickstarter has definitely gone up, right? And I just see a lot of new releases of decks, left and right, and they're all being sold out. And so I think it's growing. I think more people are getting interested in playing cards, whether it's for collecting or for playing. But I definitely think playing cards as a hobby and just kind of as a whole is definitely growing.
Okay, cool. So looks like all my questions are done. Uh, Gavin, thank you so much for this conversation. I really got from you a lot of useful information, advices. Um, I hope our viewers will write some comments. Maybe some they will. They also will have some questions that they would like to ask you. So, guys, write the questions. Don't forget to subscribe and click bell button. And see you in the next video. Bye, guys.
Bye.